Hey there, this is Christine Landl, and I am with my sister, my best friend, my business partner, Jennifer Ream, and we are so excited to be here on yet again another platform that we are creating and another chapter, another piece to our journey.
The Vibe Well Podcast. This is Jennifer Ream. So excited to be here with you guys. Our intention for this podcast is all about sharing our love for all things wellness, holistic wellness that is. And we are here to uplift, plant some seeds, and support you on your wellness journey. We've always loved being able to be out there with our community, sharing all the things that we learn. And as we grow and learn new things, we love to put them out there, and maybe they'll plant some seeds for you and help you along your journey. So here we are. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome back. Christine here with Jennifer, and we, I have to say it, are so excited.
Now it's just a thing.
I know. To have our dear friend, Lauren Peabody, and she's not just a personal friend of ours, but she's also been our family's therapist, and she's a lot of local families. She helps a lot of local families here in the Fenton area, and she's a part of our healthcare team, and it's for our family. And you know, we talk about that all the time. You can't just have one person to go to for your health and wellness, not just your doctor. It's your health coach. It's your therapist. It's your
village,
your acupuncturist. It's all of it.
Massage therapist.
Yeah, your massage therapist. Yes. Gosh, what would we do without her?
I know.
And so it's, you know, she's a part of our team, and we are happy to share her with you today and her wealth of knowledge. And there's just so much that we're going to try and cover. But at the same time, you know, we're really going to deep dive here into some great hot topics to what we've been seeing in the past couple of years, and, you know, how we can help those around us get through this. So I'm just going to do a brief little professional bio reading of hers, and but we'll let Lauren speak to all of it as well. So Lauren's inspiration for opening a therapy practice began after years of serving families in a variety of contexts. She taught parent and child interaction classes in Chicago, worked with and managed a team who intervened with families in crisis in Flint, and in 2014, Nurture Family Center opened. She's a lifelong learner and strives to always increase her knowledge and skills in evidence-based therapeutic techniques for families, individuals, and children. She believes we are all the masters of our own fate and can learn from all of our experiences, both joyful and difficult. She has a strong passion for parenting, family dynamics, and helping individuals see the connections between childhood and adult patterns. She wears many hats as a wife, mother of 3 children, and believes in therapy to her core and wishes to spread the many positive outcomes of counseling to our Fenton community. It is her hope that one day therapists will be viewed as a part of every family team, similar to that of an attorney, healthcare provider, or accountant. It really does take a village, and we wholeheartedly believe in all of that, and you embody it as well. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and excited too. Yay.
I'm just excited to have this conversation because I just think it's so important right now. And this is the one interview I've been just really, really looking forward to, and looking forward to sharing your knowledge base with like a bigger reach, even if it goes beyond just our Fenton community. Just like there's so many wonderful tools that you have, and your knowledge is just so full of depth, and so I'm so excited to share that with everybody.
Well, thank you. Me too.
So where should we start?
Well, I think too, just to start here, that the notion of having a therapist or going to therapy used to be so like, don't talk about it type of situation, or you must be going through a crazy life change to have to go to therapy. And I feel like for me, that has never been in my head, but I think that that's been a stigma to attach to it.
Well, and I would say also because I from personal experiences, so many have had not great experiences.
Yeah.
So there comes
Depends on who
that,
you go to.
becomes that kind of thing where you maybe had gone to somebody in the past during that, for me, it was past, but didn't have great experiences. So you'd get that kind of like, I don't know about that for me. But when you come across somebody who you know embodies like so much of mindfulness and all of that, all of the tools, and comes at it from a holistic perspective, which is when I met you, I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually a therapist out there that comes to the table with this kind of holistic view of our bodies. And then I was like, okay, there are people out there. I'm just being honest. That's how I was thinking it when you said that. I'm like, that's so true. But also that was my personal.
I think that it's similar to healthcare providers, where you might go to a hospital and see a bunch of people smoking outside of the hospital, yet they are advising their patients to do X, Y, and Z, but they're not practicing what they preach. I think there's a lot of clinicians that are working in all sorts of different fields that are not embodying what they are actually advising. And so I think that more people should feel the same way about their physicians, actually. We should be interviewing our physicians to see that they kind of meet us where we are. And that's the same with therapists. I say all the time, if you are seeing a therapist who does not see a therapist herself or himself, you should definitely go somewhere else.
Yes, it's so great, all of that. And that's exactly where I was kind of going with it a little bit ago. It's like, I feel like you use your therapist, you go to your therapist and use that tool or that person to help you through something at any point in your life that you feel stuck and that you don't feel like you're moving forward from it. And I feel like that's how, we've had conversations with you and come to you and like, hey, I'm stuck in this moment. I just need somebody to talk to. And it's like there's this personal trust and you just have this comfort about you. And I think it is because you are so authentic, and that part is so important.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I feel like we depend on individuals almost a little too much. Like I feel our partners, our close friends, our siblings, they can't be all things to us. So I think we need that village, like we've talked about, of support where there is someone else who can be kind of a neutral third party. I don't think that while you're in the thick of things, you can actually have all of the valuable resources because you're in the midst of it. I mean, I see a therapist because I can't always see clearly, and I can't depend on my partner for all of the things to see clearly because he's in it too. So I think having that neutral third-party person is really important.
And so what would you say is your foundation for helping people move through things? Because I think that a lot of times, like Jen mentioned, there's certain therapists out there that want to keep you kind of stuck in that. Let's go back, and let's go find out why you're this way. And I feel like you're constantly going back and going back. So like, how do you help people to move forward and through these things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I was actually in a session over the weekend, and he was talking about the why of who he is, why he's made the decisions he's made. And while I think that's really important, and I think that we can connect a lot of what we do in the present to the whys, and we can figure that out. And sometimes figuring it out matters because we have maybe made some habits that aren't all that helpful for us. But therapy is also about action. And so if you're seeing a therapist and they're not helping you develop almost like action plans for how to implement new habits, whether they are different habits of how to think, different habits of wellness, implementing some sort of exercise routine, which kind of sounds more like a nutritionist or personal trainer, but it's kind of this whole body approach, and it requires action and movement. And so I think that my philosophy is both meeting people where they are. So if I have someone in front of me that is clearly in a survival phase, then some of that wellness stuff is not going to be pertinent at that point. So first we have to move from that fight-flight survival point into where we can start implementing action steps. So I would say meet someone where they are, and then also it's important to have an action plan.
That's so good. Yeah, I think that part is so integral in the growth process in not staying stuck. So I think it's important that we really dive into the last couple of years too, and what you've seen out there. We know what we've seen. We've been strong advocates for our children's mental health personally, and standing up for medical freedom, standing up for our not treating this as if every single person is a one size fits all. And so I think it'd be great to hear from you some of the overall struggles that you've seen from the children, from a family dynamic standpoint, from what the past 2 years has done to our society.
Yeah. So I can say that I have some random kind of statistics to throw out. We know that 5.3 million children are diagnosed with anxiety. And these are the diagnosable, right? So these are the people that are getting treatment. These are the people that are coming either to their physicians or to therapists. So we know that the number's a lot higher. We know that 5.3 million children have been diagnosed with ADHD and a little over 4 million with depression. So this is a pervasive problem in our society. 31% of parents said in October of 2020 that they could tell a significant difference in their children's mental health. So I think that those are all, I think we all know that. That's kind of an obvious conclusion of what the last 2 years brought. The other thing is while I think a lot of adults think that access to mental health care has increased with telehealth, but in fact with children, it has decreased because for a lot of people, they access mental health care through the schools. So with the shutting down of schools, and there's been so many rules and regulations, and social workers aren't able to do what they used to be able to do in schools. Things are changing in that way too. So I think there's been a real problem. Just those are kind of stats, but then talking about a broader sense, I think that we are living in a space as parents with a lot of fear. And we know that you cannot there's not a lot of binary things in life. There's not a lot of absolutes in life. But there is one absolute, that you cannot live in fear and in love at the same time. It's just not possible in the body. It's not possible to parent a child from a loving place and still be afraid. So I think that is probably what I am seeing is the biggest, I guess I'll just call it problem, is that yes, children are being diagnosed at an increased rate, but parents are using a lot of fear in parenting.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and that's such a strong energy for our kids to have to live in and embody from us. And I feel like we've created this theme of that our kids are supposed to be protecting the adults. And that to me has been a really hard narrative for me to like, our kids have to do this for their grandparents. Our kids have to do this for other adults. Or our kids have to do this for other children. And it's like, at what point do we start taking care of ourselves? And our children need to learn that you have to take care of yourself and your mental health and your physical health to be able to do these things for other people anyways. So put yourself aside is what they're saying, and focus on taking care of that other person. So it's personally not something that, resonated with us. And so we've struggled with that a little bit. Maybe in the beginning, it was like, okay, let's all do this to see if this works. We now know 2 years later that this is just way more than about our health. And so now we're seeing, and you're seeing, I'm sure, personally in your work, the ramifications of what we're doing to our children's mental health and their physical health, how we're, their immune systems aren't as strong as they used to be. So I think that all of those things that we see without even being in that, day-to-day work of it is, it's just out there. But what types of things, I guess, in that same arena are you doing to or advising on helping them to move along?
Yeah, so I think, again, it comes first with meeting families where they are. And to be very frank and honest, lots of times in our practice, we use is not the correct word, but lots of times the child coming in with some sort of anxiety or ADHD or behavioral problems at home is a jumping off point for us to then kind of circle around to the parents and really try to work on some parenting skills. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot we can do with kids from a therapeutic standpoint, but 1 hour of therapy, and really it's 45 minutes of therapy every few weeks, is just the tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, I mean, for us at our practice, we require, if we're going to see a child, then we also need to be seeing the parents sporadically as well, so that we can talk about some of those parenting strategies. So I think that what we're doing in the office is important, but I think what I'd rather focus on is kind of what we're teaching parents. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes down to resilience building skills. We know that resilience is a learned skill. It is something that can be built, and that we live in a society where that is not in the forefront of what we teach our kids. Mm-hmm. So our kids spend 6 hours on average a day, 5 days a week at school, and they're learning all of these educational skills that are extremely important, but they're not having this opportunity to learn emotional intelligence. They're not learning about emotional vocabulary, what to do with feelings, that feelings are normal and okay. But it stems first from the parents. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a lot of what we're trying to focus on is, as a parent, it's really important for you to be talking about feelings at home. It is really important for you to be sharing things with your children about what's going on with the world in a developmentally appropriate way. It is kind of interesting to me where I see that a lot of parents try to protect their children from going through adversity, but they're comfortable handing them a phone that is going to just blow up in their face with all the things going on in the world that they're not really ready developmentally to handle. So I think we're almost subcontracting some of our parenting to media companies, which is a whole nother topic.
And it's very scary.
Yeah. So I think there's these resilience building skills that we can focus on, like learning how to increase our child's emotional intelligence, but first, obviously, that comes from the parents, and it's really hard.
Yeah, and do you find that we're coddling more of this generation and versus teaching them how, like we're preventing them, like you said, from suffering, and we don't want them to go through all of these things, and not teaching them how to go through it. So when they are going through it, they don't have the tools to.
Yeah, I think
navigate.
We are, like I kind of said, we're at the same time coddling them. We're not teaching them these skills, but then we're sending them to their room for 6 hours at a time where they're exposed to many things they're not ready to understand, and then kind of throwing up our hands and not understanding why our child is making these decisions that we didn't think they would ever make. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're kind of both hugging our kids too tightly, but then throwing them to the lions without ever giving them lessons on how to battle. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like maybe that came from, just in defense for our parents, that we're navigating something we've never had to
absolutely
understand until we're going to be kind of the generation of parents who are the guinea pigs.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to, unfortunately, our kids, mine thankfully didn't have it until later because we didn't have access to it. It wasn't around. Mm-hmm. Social media wasn't around until your kids, I think, were in high school.
The biggest battle that I've ever had with my teenagers was Snapchat. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest battle when it came out. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't even tell you how many nights of fighting and crying, and because everyone had it and they didn't. And
Same,
I mean, oh my gosh. So yeah, and I think too, it's the technology has evolved so fast, and so many different technologies are evolving so fast. Some good, some not so good. And so we're caught in like this reactionary thing, like, oh yeah, this is great technology, but yet, wait a minute, let's look back. What has this done the last few years to my family dynamics? And so that's kind of where we're at, I think too.
I do too. And I think we are really quick to jump as adults. And I do all of these things myself too. So if I look back over my last weekend, my children spent a lot of time in front of screens. So, but I think that we are also uncomfortable saying no to our kids. And I think that that dynamic between our children makes us feel uncomfortable and not good. And so I think that we have to kind of explore our own feelings and our own emotions about boundaries with our kids. And that's really hard to do.
It is.
And without guidance, I certainly can't do it by myself. So and parenting is kind of my jam. But so I think that it's really important. I think one of the things I've been thinking about recently is that we have all of these mental health disorders popping up all over the place. And I really hate the term disorder. It really bothers me because I think it pathologizes it and it makes it an individual problem. I think that mental health is a collective problem, and our feelings are alarm systems. They are. There was actually a really interesting study done in the 90s, and it was with a big sample size, and they had 4 decks of cards. I'm going to try to sum this up quickly. They had 4 decks of cards, and the first 2 decks were the quote good cards, and the second 2 decks were the bad cards. And so after 10 rounds of playing this game, they also hooked up all of their participants to measurements that would measure essentially like the body's internal stress system. And by the 10th round, their body was already registering that something was going on. This was kind of a trick. There might be 2 good and there might be 2 bad. Their body knew. But it took, on average, 80 times playing the game before logically people knew that there was some sort of pattern. So I feel like this is kind of can be broadly shown over our entire culture that we know as parents and our kids know. Our kids are the canaries in the coal mines. They are saying something's going on. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. And we either have a choice to listen to them or we have a choice to kill the canary, and then I guess we're all in danger and it's going to be too late. So I feel like as a parent, it is vital to listen to your child's behavior. And a lot of times we want to find a quick solution. A lot of times we want to pathologize it. A lot of times we don't really want to deal with the big picture. And
a lot of times we're medicating it.
Yes.
In the past, that's
yes.
I mean, we just had a conversation with Trace about mindfulness and that whole thing, and I think we were just talking about that the pharmaceuticals and how that was the first line of defense when we were younger.
When it still is for people who have not. I don't think it's
You're
mainstream.
Right. You're right. You're right. In our world, we've evolved to the point where that wouldn't even be an option.
No, but I think that it's still mainstream.
That is so common.
It's very common, and a lot of. I mean, the other thing that I think is happening too is that teachers are. This would be a whole nother topic, but I have so much respect for our teachers, and they are overworked and they are underpaid, and so. And they don't have the education to know that trauma looks exactly like ADHD. So if you have a child with trauma and they are displaying symptoms of ADHD, let's be honest, that's really hard.
Yeah.
You have a classroom of 30 third graders and you have 5% of your population. So 2 out of 20 is going to be really tough. So, it's what we're asking of adults and parents is, and I feel like we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but I feel like it's not something we can do.
Yeah.
We're not living, a lot of us are not living in this village mentality. And that is what we need. We need a village, but we are kind of subcontracting a lot of our parenting because we're overwhelmed too.
Yeah, we're navigating so many unknown and uncertainty situations, uncertain situations right now. And I feel like sometimes it is easier just to like put it off on someone else to fix it.
Absolutely.
And so, which to a point is good because we need that village and we need that team, but it has to be the right person. And I think it goes back to, for me, I know for Jen, I can speak to, it's the root cause. Let's get down to the root cause. Let's be functional about this. And so I know, just because I know you well, that's your philosophy too. And I think that if we could just get back to that mentality, like what is the root cause of this? And ADHD is a great example because that has skyrocketed. And we know that since when we were younger, I mean, you just didn't really hear that. And I don't think it's because we weren't diagnosing it. I think it's because things have changed environmentally, medically, all of it, what we're doing to our bodies. And so, I just think that, it's all relevant and it's all tied together, and how we're handling it and having the tools, which is why we're having this conversation, because we do need to be able to share this information. And it does need to be, I think that, for a long time, we were a very small minority of what we were doing in our philosophy. And we still get a lot of eye rolls, I'm sure. And I'm sure people talk behind our back a lot. Because we don't hold back, and I think that's so important. But I just think that this conversation is so important because parents need to, one, not feel alone, and need to, two, feel empowered that we can do something, and we can do it by getting the right people in our corner and empowering ourselves with truly, it's almost like a new connection we can have with our children too, because parenting, when our parents were parenting us and when our parents were parented, was such I feel like a dominating,
aggressive,
superior,
so aggressive.
Like, I'm superior. I control you. I tell you what you're going to do. I tell you how you're going to live your life.
Yes.
And so I think like now the dynamics have changed. I know it has for me because I'm definitely more like child-led, and I'm here to guide you and lead you and keep you safe. And you taught me this, and I love this. I love this. I love this. You said you are here to keep them healthy and safe. So what you're doing is what you're doing focused on keeping them healthy and safe, then okay, then this is the route you need to go. But is this what you're doing to just like control them as a person and their journey here on earth? Like that
or out of fear,
which I feel like that
all the time
comes from fear. Like when you're trying to control their journey, it comes from fear. Most of the time, our fear of what we lack and what we wanted as a child, or what we wish we would have done.
Yes.
So, I kind of went off on a tangent,
but that's a really good point though.
I feel like it's so important in how we choose to move forward in connecting with our children, whether they're small or teenagers or middle school or young adults. I feel like truly listening and validating. And then, I don't know, I guess, what are some of those things that you listen for to know that how to guide them through when we're trying to build resilience?
I think the first step is knowing, with, again, not a lot of absolutes in life, but this is one of them too, is that behavior is always a symptom to something else. So if a child is having a behavior that is whatever it looks like, there's a reason behind it. And your job as a parent, from my perspective, is not to stop the behavior. It is to figure out why the behavior is happening. So I think we can do this alongside our children too. I mean, clearly when babies are little, we can tell they're hungry. They need their diaper changed. So there's always a reason why they are crying too. They're lonely. They want to be held. So we do this really well with young children, but we kind of start to lose touch with that as they age, that if they're kind of isolating themselves, or if they are seeming a little off, there's a reason. If they're arguing a lot, maybe they just want attention. So maybe the why is, maybe I need to take them for a one-on-one mom-child date. So I think that's first and foremost, that you believe in your heart that if your child could behave well, they would. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, then it's your job to figure out why. So that's kind of number one. Number 2 is teaching them about making mistakes and that making mistakes is okay. I think that lots of times we have standards for our children that we don't even hold for ourselves. And making mistakes is okay, but also that forgiveness, saying I'm sorry to your children. We require a lot of our children to kind of come to us and apologize for their actions, but lots of times we're making mistakes too, which is fine because we all do, but then we're not following it up with an apology and asking for forgiveness. So I think if you wanted to sum it up, I think it's also role modeling what you hope for your child, which I think can be really tough. I think going back to we're the guinea pigs of screens, I also think that our generation of parents is also the guinea pigs of what it looks like to start to instill some emotional intelligence into parenting. So I know for a fact that most people that are around our age were not parented in that way. We were taught to repress our emotions. We were taught to just toe the line and do the thing. And we weren't taught to advocate for ourselves. So I think we can also explain that to our children.
I was just going to say that. Don't you feel like this is one thing I've learned along the way as I'm learning and growing and practicing these things? You have to be willing to say to your kids, like, hey, like, I'm just trying to figure life out too. Yeah. Like, you have to be so transparent about that as well, because we, like you said, we are the generation that has evolved a little bit in that emotional intelligence or awareness, I guess. And so we have to be able to like say, hey, I don't know, I don't have all the answers, but I'm like trying to figure it out, and I'm trying to do the work and figure out why I have this behavior that is not a good behavior. Just like you have your behavior that's not such a good behavior. Like you have to be able to own it too and be transparent about that.
Yeah, and I think we I say in my office a lot that if we don't tell children the truth, we aren't protecting them from the truth, we are sending them signals that they can't handle the truth. So I think that honesty on the table, in a developmentally appropriate way, of course, is always important. I think that because we weren't necessarily taught emotional intelligence, we have, I mean, if we look at our world, we have a lot of narcissism, we have a lot of polarization, we have a lot of groupthink happening. And I think that we can be, as parents, the front line of teaching our kids what is okay and what's not okay. How do we forgive? How can we make mistakes? It actually leads to creativity. I mean, we know all of these things from many, many research studies. So I think that if we can start to embody that as individuals, which for me requires a lot of action. It requires me to get up and exercise, to journal, to meditate, to go to therapy, to really focus on self-care, because I can't do any of the stuff with my kids if I'm not taking care of myself. I think we can, this sounds kind of corny, but I think we can change the world for the next generation.
We do too.
Yes. But I think that it hits the nail on the head, and that kind of goes back to what we said of like, we have to take care of ourselves mentally and physically and all of these things that we embody in order to be there for our children, it's leading by example too. Yes. Yeah. And I think being transparent, being vulnerable, letting them know we're not perfect. We're doing the best that we can. And I even tell my kids now, like, I'm doing this because it's my job to keep you healthy and it's my job to keep you safe. I always think too, and we talk about this a lot, even just in our, having a team of young staff at Vibe Well, it's like, let's let them know why. Like, let them know why we're doing what we're doing, or why we make the choices, or why we're guiding them in the way that we're guiding them. And so they can connect all of the dots, I think is really important for them to be able to be resilient and to be able to have some critical thinking.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's another part that we've kind of taken away from our kids by just telling them what we think they need to know. It's like they're losing that ability to critically think themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Just tell me what I need to do. I'm like, no, like, you need to make these decisions. Like, tap into what does that feel like for you to make that decision?
Right.
Vision yourself making this decision, envision yourself and how does that feel?
Absolutely.
And I think those are just like such important pieces.
Yeah, my kind of go-to answer for that at home, but then also when I teach it, is when a child asks you a question, to say, you make good choices. What do you think? And to always kind of put it back on the child. But I also think then it's important as a parent to tap into yourself and what does it feel like when your child asks you a question and then does what you say? It kind of makes you feel good. Mm-hmm. It makes you feel powerful and important. And that's okay.
In control.
And like you kind of are the agent of their faith. Or their fate, rather. And we want our children to know they are the masters of their own fate. And we also know that that's connected to anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. That feeling of agency really matters. And we have taken that away from our children. We've taken that away from high school age children. We start to plan their future when they're 13 or 14 years old. So they are already in this space of just, I have so many teens that come to my office and they are just out of their minds because they feel like they have to have stuff figured out. And I knew going through my 20s that I would eventually figure it out. I think that when I've taught resilience classes before, one of the questions that always comes up is, what kinds of kids do you see that are resilient? And I don't have a lot of data on what that looks like, but what I know from my experience and my practice is that kids who go through adversity, kids who are from divorced families, who kind of have just situations that they couldn't necessarily control, but then they also have people that are there for them, that they have a secure attachment with, those are the kids. Those are the kids that go out into the world and they're like, okay, I'll figure it out, no problem. But I think it's really hard when you have an intact family that maybe doesn't have financial adversity or relational adversity. I think it can be hard to help your children be resilient and give them opportunities to make their own choices. Mm-hmm. So I think it's something that we have to be aware of and focus on too.
Well, and
I was just going to say, we see so much of the having to have it figured out, have it all figured out between our staff, younger staff at VibeWell and our own kids. I never forget
that age.
Yeah, our own personal experience, but I just never forget one of my sons coming to me at such a young age, just in tears in his room because of he didn't know what he was going to do and he didn't want to leave the house eventually. And like all these things about like adult decisions that he was thinking about at such a young age. And I was like, where is this coming from? Like, why are you even thinking about this right now? Like,
it's our society.
It's the system. I hate to say it. It is the system. Yeah. And I mean, I've learned so much in the last 2 years about the school system and the educational system. And I, going through it, was having a wonderful experience. But I would do things so differently with the information that I have now. And in being in the present day scenarios, I feel I really empathize and have compassion for parents who have to make decisions because the system needs to change in such a dramatic way. All of our systems do, not just educational, but the medical system, we talk about that a lot, the healthcare system, the financial system, all of it has to change and has to fail and be rebuilt. Mm-hmm. And that's just the state that we're in right now. And hopefully, my hope is that having conversations like these helps us make small changes consistently so that we can rebuild in a better way from the past 2 years. And that's what I would focus on right now is like, how can we each make decisions in our personal family lives to rebuild in a new way for the next generation and learn from things that don't work anymore. We're changing. We have changed. We cannot go back and we can't, we can look back and make better decisions moving forward. And that's just, hopefully, that's my hope that's where we're going.
And I think it really is going to stem from adults getting to the point where they can, meditation is really the biggest part of it, get still and quiet and start to tap into their own internal gut response instinct system.
Yes.
And I think that we all have a really powerful knowing inside of us. But then we also have, and we don't really need to go down this road, but we also have some generational trauma that lives within all of us that we also kind of have to know is there.
Yeah.
So we have
The
these
shadow
patterns.
side.
Exactly. We have these patterns of thinking that might not even be ours. So we have to be able to own the fact that we have been separated from our feeling self just by living in the world we live in. And that's okay. But we have to come home to ourselves and then start to kind of critically analyze what we do, why we do it, which is what therapy can help with, and what journaling can help with, talking to trusted friends can help with. And I kind of feel like the word that kind of keeps going in my head is, in order to navigate this world that we're living in, we kind of have to be radical. We have to think in this way that might be a little bit different. It might be a little bit edgy. It might be maybe kind of weird, because if we start paying attention to our feelings, we might start making different choices for our family.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I can 100% attest to this. I think that oftentimes the fear gets in the way and people won't make that decision because they're not truly in alignment with what their soul is driving them to do. Those are hard decisions that you sometimes have to make, because I think thinking differently and then taking the action differently there's like that line where people have such a hard time crossing. I mean, when I pulled Samantha from school this year, I mean, it was so uncomfortable from having to answer all of the questions and why are you doing that? And I knew 100%, I would do this for the rest of her school.
Right.
She's not there yet because she's dealing with the chatter around her that she's
social
doing
pressures.
something. Yeah, there's a lot of social pressures there. I even got it. Like, are you sure she's a social kid? Like, why are you doing that? I'm like, I first and foremost know what's best for her from a intuitive standpoint. Like, she's not going to get the attention that she needs from her teacher or whatever. So my point being is that these decisions from crossing over there, like, I think differently and now I need to do differently, it can be uncomfortable because it's out of the norm for society.
Yes,
but that is what changed. And I think that's, for me, what was so pivotal was that embracing that changes are only constant, and I'm okay with it now. Like, I'm okay. I've done enough things in my life now outside of the box to know, like, I will be okay as long as I'm following my intuition. As long as I'm following my intuition and I am in alignment, things will be okay, even if they are hard in the moment.
Well, and there's some research that I think is pertinent, that the people who really value happiness are actually those that are not as happy. So we know that if you can kind of have that neutral being in alignment and not focus on the happiness matters, and then when it's sad, I need to rush out of that feeling. If you can kind of just be in yourself and neutral, even if something isn't making you sure, but there really is, in terms of feelings, there are no absolutes. It's always changing. It's always moving. So if you can kind of sit in that and just rest there for a few minutes, you can kind of pull yourself out of needing that reassurance sometimes.
So be without judgment with yourself.
And that our thoughts, and I'm sure you've talked about this before because this is kind of part of mindfulness, but our thoughts are not who we are. They are based on our genetic, historic, environmental patterns. My favorite example to use in the practice is, if I told you not to think about elephants, what would happen? You'd think about elephants, right? So I think that when we try not to think about something, when we try to think about something, our brain doesn't work that way. We actually don't really have control over our thoughts, which is what anxiety is, which is what depression is that just kind of patterns of really negative thought processes that then affect our behavior. But if we can understand that we are not our thoughts, that we have this other voice that can talk back to our thoughts, and whether you want to call it the soul or the subconscious or whatever you want to call it, we are so powerful within our brains, and our brains have so much power in our bodies, and we can affect change in many different ways if we are ready to change, which that decision's really hard.
It's so hard. Even to accept that there needs to be change is hard for people.
Well, and right now, I mean, I don't know, I know you know, but it's just that whole, there's such a strong narrative about what you should be thinking. And so if everything that you know in your gut and your soul and your consciousness tells you differently, if you're not strong in that, that would be really hard for people right now, because you really have to be confident. And if you have had a practice for a long time and you're confident in that inner voice, it's not your thought voice. When you're confident in that intuition voice, you don't like sway from that, because you just know that it even if that goes against everything else that's being said out there, you know that's your truth. So I think that is the message too, that you keep saying, empower yourself to listen to that other voice. No matter what the chatter is going on around you. If you practice that long enough, change comes naturally. You embrace it, you get it, you are flowing with it, you're not resisting it, and the other stuff matters less to you.
Yeah, and there's actually a word for it in psychology. It's called cognitive dissonance. It's trying to hold two competing truths, and it's really it just really screws up our brains, because when we have been taught to believe that a certain way of doing something, so parenting or just humaning in general, if we've been taught to do it this certain way, if we've been taught to accept behaviors, so we know that narcissism is prevalent in our society. So if we've been taught that that's okay, that cognitive dissonance comes in when your brain starts saying, wait a second, maybe this isn't okay. Maybe this way of parenting isn't working for my family. And it's two competing truths it's really hard to see the way through that.
We talk about that a lot
We
right
do.
now, cognitive dissonance. I think it's a great topic. And so how do you get people out of that, being stuck in that in between state?
Well, I think that they're first and foremost, there cannot be absolutes. You said this before, that there's no one size fits all mentality, and that two people can be right. And that just has to be real, because if we start to make it a yes or no, right or wrong, truth or lie, we're just going to lose too many people.
We're not going forward.
We're not.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because, and I always say this too, is that each person has their own truth and perspective based on where they're coming from. So that's their truth, and that makes them right, and this is my truth, and that makes me right. Like, there's not a right or a wrong, and I think that part is so important.
Right. Yeah, and I think we need to be gentle with ourselves and accept ourselves as we are, but then also kind of challenge ourselves to, here's kind of what I say. If you have a really, really strong opinion about anything, and I'm talking anything, and clearly I have strong opinions about things, but if you have a strong opinion about anything, that's where the work starts. And if you feel like that strong opinion needs to apply to everyone, that's where the work starts. So whatever you feel kind of emotionally uprisen about, that's where your own work starts. And so if you are finding yourself consistently angry at one particular child or your partner or society as a whole, then that's where the work can begin. And the cognitive dissonance is a process that's going to be long and hard, but eventually, if you start being still and quiet and listening to yourself, the truth will come eventually.
Yes.
So do you feel like then when you move past that, you feel more neutral and less triggered?
Yes.
When that particular thing comes up?
Yes.
You feel like you've grown from that?
Yes. Yes. I think that, and I say this again in the practice all of the time, the children, but then also the life experiences that are the hardest for us to deal with emotionally, they are put there to help us grow. We all have a child who just kind of like, just like irks us a little bit in a way. And for everyone, it's different. But that child is your opportunity to grow in yourself, not to try to change them. But over the process of change, your child will change as well. But it's it is your. I mean, I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's pointing out all of your stuff, and I think that is such an amazing way to look at it, as opposed to making it someone else's problem.
Yeah, and I do say that all the time. I tell my children, you teach me more about myself than I teach you, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's true. I
Yes.
mean, that's why I'm so passionate about like learning and moving through it and being our best version of what we can be. And
Well, I think on a collective basis right now, just to kind of wrap us up, because we're getting towards an hour, but on a collective basis, this is the lesson that the last couple of years has given us, an opportunity to self-reflect, and we're being intentionally divided in so many ways in every part of our lives. So this is an opportunity for all of us collectively to go inward, find the truth within ourselves, empower each other, stand with each other, support each other on this journey, and meet those that you love where they're at.
Absolutely.
And that's hard. Like personally, I admit that's a very difficult process because we're all in different levels of awareness and we're at different levels of consciousness consistently.
Absolutely.
So that's challenging for a lot of us. So we have to keep coming back to remembering that that's where we're at. And, but we can make the choice to support each other and have really, thoughtful, mindful conversations and love one another.
Yeah, I have so there was a man, Viktor Frankl, he survived the concentration camps, and he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is amazing. And he calls himself a tragic optimist. And so it's not a toxic positivity deal. It's a tragic optimist, meaning that he feels that you can always find meaning in times of tragedy, times of hardship. And I think that is what many of us are finding, that we can cultivate gratitude, generosity, meeting people where they are. And these are the skills we want to teach our children.
So beautifully said.
So beautifully said, and such an important conversation right now to have and to continue to have.
I was going to say, we got to do it again because I know there's lots of topics we can dive
We need a
into.
part two. I think even just like relationships and doing this journey along with a partner, which is such an important part of this. And
So hard.
so there's lots that we need to continue. So to be continued for sure. If there's a few things that you could leave with parents right now, navigating these uncertain times, where do you start with your own children, and what's your foundation, and how do you stay grounded right now?
I think the word that is in my head all the time is pause. Pause in the morning when I'm by myself. And I repeat, for me, my mantra is the universe is always working for me. So I think, with everyone, that's not going to work for everyone, but kind of pausing and having something, a phrase maybe that grounds you or a practice that grounds you, and then pausing before I react, which I will self-admittedly say I'm not always great at, but trying to have a response rather than a reaction, I think is to our children, to clients who we work with, to friends, to family. I think we just need to pause. So I would say that, and a lot of just be gentle with yourself, be gentle with your kids, and knowing that I'm sitting here spouting out all of this advice, and ultimately I don't follow all of it all the time, and being gentle with yourself is really important as well.
Yeah, because it's not about being perfect.
No.
And we're all here to do this journey together. We all chose to do it together with our families. I think connection right now is so key. Like truly connecting with our kids and truly connecting with our loved ones and our family and our friends that lift us up and that we lift up. And I think, if anything, those things will get us through this time. And
and we have to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant of what we expose ourselves to. We know that 14 minutes of news in the morning will still have a negative impact on you 6 hours later. So be vigilant in the time we're spending, who we're spending it with. We also know we're a product of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So I think that there is, I mean, we are learning now from a generation of people, and I know there's a lot of judgment about it, but there are a lot of people exiting jobs that they feel are toxic to them. And I support that. You know, I think there's a lot of other stuff going along with it as well, but I think that that's important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good.
I cannot wait to meet again and have this conversation even deeper. So
it's so fun to speak with like-minded people and with your background. And I mean, if you're in our community and you now have people too at your practice that are telehealth, right?
We do.
So
we have telehealth and we have, I mean, we're still on a waiting list, but we are trying.
Right.
And
I was going to say, do you want to share your, how to connect with you? I know you are your practice is very full right now. And so I don't know if we can put in the show notes, maybe some resources that you would offer out.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
We'll
do that. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You're a treasure to us. That's for sure. And we're grateful to have you. And we are really looking forward to the next time, maybe sometime in the early spring, and we can really kind of touch on some more hot topics and just continue conversation.
Yay.
So thank you. We love you.
Thank you. Love you too.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks again, friends, for joining us today on our latest podcast episode. We love sharing this with you. So please share the love if you feel called to all your friends and family.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on what we're going to talk about next. It's always so juicy.
And of course, you can find us on social, Instagram, Vibe Well Lifestyle, and Vibe Well on Facebook. Love y'all.
And if you're in town, make sure you stop by and see us at Vibe Well too.
Yeah, we would love to see your cute face.
See you soon.
Bye.